Two Jews are sitting on a park bench in Berlin, 1938. One is reading the Jewish community newspaper. The other is reading the notoriously virulently anti-Semitic Nazi propaganda paper called Der Stürmer. One says to the other, "How can you possibly read that thing?" His friend responds, "Well, it's easy. When I read that one, I only hear about our troubles and our horrible fate. But in this one, I read that we're doing great. We run all the banks, we control all the governments, we direct all the media. It's much more optimistic." Well, friends, I don't need to go through the stats. I don't need to cite the number of incidents. I don't need to remind you of swastikas found in this place or that, or God forbid, the terrible physical violence in synagogues. This Rosh Hashanah, the world seems to have grown more hostile and foreboding for us. This is hardly the first time in our history that Jews have despaired. We have members of our congregation who lived under the Soviet regime and others who are survivors of the Holocaust. This is nothing compared to what they endured. And yet we're scared. We've come to realize that we are more vulnerable than we had imagined. We want to figure out what's going on and how we can deal with it. So we gather on this new year as Jews, longing for the comfort of family and community, reflected, relieved to rejoice in the depth and beauty of our tradition. We know that prior generations have been through difficult times before, and we have always made it through. So we come here seeking our own measure of resilience in the face of adversity. We long for courage at a time of fear and alienation. And we want to be the light that chases away the darkness. Deborah Lipstadt is the foremost scholar of anti-Semitism in the United States. She writes, "It is hard, if not impossible, to explain something that is essentially irrational, delusional, and absurd. Anti-Semitism has never made any sense, and it never will." And Barry Weiss describes anti-Semitism as an ever-morphing conspiracy theory in which Jews play the starring role in spreading evil in the world. Anti-Semitism successfully turns Jews into the symbol of whatever a given civilization defines as its most sinister and threatening qualities. So under communism, Jews were capitalists. Under Nazism, the Jews were race contaminators. And today, when the greatest sins are racism and colonialism, Israel, the Jew among the nations, is being demonized as the last bastion of white racist colonialism, a unique source of evil not just in the region, but in the world. When I grew up in heavily Jewish Great Neck, it seemed to me that anti-Semitism was over. Something our parents or grandparents may have endured, but thankfully no longer a threat in our day. Many of you who grew up in similarly Jewish communities might say the same, but some of you would tell a different tale. I recently got to know a new member of our congregation who grew up in Newtown, just a half hour from here, and we're about the same age, but his experiences are very different. There were very few Jewish kids in his school, and it was common for him to find swastikas carved into desks, for bullies to taunt Jewish kids while tossing pennies at them, and for his father's business to be targeted with anti-Semitic graffiti. If this was the case in Newtown not so long ago, why is today different? What has changed? Well, several things. First, human beings can spread ideas more quickly and more easily than ever before. A generation ago, No one was willing to publish or sell anti-Semitic writings. But today, the nature of the internet and social media mean that anyone can post anything, anytime, from anywhere. And they can do it anonymously. And then anyone else can access that open sewer of hate. Second, make no mistake about it. Anti-Semites have been enabled and emboldened. Those in power, both at home and abroad, are directly responsible for the legitimization of explicit hostility toward Jews. Our president may not be an anti-Semite himself, but as Lipstadt writes, Trump's anti-Semitic followers believe that his dog whistles, his messages coded specifically to white supremacist groups, give them free rein to openly acknowledge their contempt for racial minorities, Muslims, homosexuals, and Jews. And Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the UK's Labour Party, who may yet become Prime Minister, has facilitated and amplified expressions of anti-Semitism. And he leads a party in which it's now common to speak of an international banking cabal and the Hollywood media elite. Third, as Bret Stephens has noted, the moral guardrails that keep bigotry down have been eroded. In January, Aryeh Tuckman of the ADL's Center on Extremism spoke on this bima, and he noted that one of the great successes of our community, the Jewish community, in the 20th century was that we made it taboo to express anti-Semitism in the public sphere or in polite conversation. Well, that boundary is actively being challenged. As Ricky Gervais observed, there was once a social cost to inflammatory speech, and now one can be a bigot without consequences. Fourth, we've seen an evolution in what equality means. Thankfully, in recent years, many have been willing to speak up about previously ignored mistreatment in our society. We've seen it with Me Too and Black Lives Matter. And this is a good thing. So now the same goes for us. We may once have been willing to sweep minor anti-Semitic incidents under the rug, but no longer. Indeed, when swastikas were discovered at Staples, the administration immediately condemned it as a hateful act and mounted a swift, proactive response. Yes, the world has changed in many ways. But I'm here not just to describe what's going on. I want to help us figure out what we can do about it. Mark Twain wrote about Jewish history. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Persian rose and filled the planet with sound and splendor. The Greeks and Romans followed, and they made a vast noise, and they're gone. Other peoples have sprung up too, and they held their torch high for a time, but it burned out. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Friends, the secret is our resilience. Resilience is the most important quality we can cultivate in our children and in ourselves. Resilience is focusing not on what happens to us, but on how we react to it. Resilience is refusing to let anti-Semitism define us, lest we see our own experience through the eyes of those who hate us. As Anthony Julius has observed, contempt for Jews, when sufficiently widespread, can foster self-contempt among Jews. Rabbi Yisrael Goldstein defined Jewish resilience when, just 2 days after the attack on his synagogue in Poway, California, he wrote, "I pray that my missing finger serves as a constant reminder to me, a reminder that every single human being is created in the image of God, a reminder that I am part of a people that has survived the worst destruction and will always endure. A reminder that my ancestors gave their lives so that I can live in freedom in America, and a reminder most of all to never, ever, not ever be afraid to be Jewish. Yes, resilience is responding to a synagogue shooting by confronting fear, by showing up in droves the following Shabbat, as so many of us did. And resilience is recognizing that we are powerful, minus the conspiracy theories, of course. But in truth, one of the most important features of Jewish life today is our power. Israel is founded explicitly on the premise that only Jewish power can protect Jewish people. And here in America, we Jews are powerful far beyond our numbers. For example, we have very intentionally and openly developed relationships. Congress can agree on almost nothing. Yet more than 95% of Congress consistently votes to support Israel. That, my friends, is Jewish power. And our power enables us to control our own destiny. And resilience is having allies and friends. I became friends with Reverend Bernard Wilson at Northfield Congregational Church in Weston, in part because he engaged me in important conversations about Israel and Zionism. The two of us are leading an interfaith pilgrimage to Israel next May. I invite you to come with us on this journey of faith and understanding. And it is also essential for us to cultivate courage, friends. 2,000 years ago, Hillel taught, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Friends, this is the very definition of Jewish courage. So let us stand up for ourselves. For who else will stand up for us? A member of our congregation who sends her children to a secular private school noticed something strange recently. When she looked at the newly unveiled logo of the school, it seemed like there was a gigantic cross in the middle of it. This was not only surprising, but highly disconcerting and offensive. So together with another family, she and her husband brought their concerns to the school leadership. And to their credit, the school leaders listened. And they immediately began to take substantive steps to modify the logo. She wrote to me, "Just two families did make a difference. In a big world where I often feel that my one vote, opinion, or story seems insignificant among the many, I can say that at that moment, a Jewish concern was heard, and changes are in order to make things better. It takes courage to be a Jew, to stand up and voice our concern." Let us be inspired by her example. Let us speak up, especially when it might be easier to remain quiet. After all, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And friends, let us enter into brave conversations. This winter, a fellow clergy leader in our interfaith community organizing effort wore a Palestinian kafia, the headdress, as a neck scarf to a couple of our Connect events. Now, he is a pastor of great stature within our community. I was hesitant to bring it up to him because I knew that it could be a difficult conversation. I decided instead that it was an opportunity for a courageous conversation. And the opportunity came on a brisk early spring afternoon in the parking lot of a church in downtown Hartford. We had just finished a successful round of meetings with our state attorney general and our governor. If not now, when? I thought. So I began. Before we part, Pastor, I would want you to know that I too am very strongly supportive of the civil rights of Palestinians. I also love and support the state of Israel. So in that context, can I ask, what does wearing a keffiyeh mean to you? We proceeded to have a difficult but honest conversation about Zionism and colonialism, about the centrality of Israel to Jews, about the Jewish right to self-determination and self-defense, and about the very real needs and rights of the Palestinian people. I can't say that we agreed on everything, but we truly listened and we heard one another. So I encourage you to enter into a brave conversation. Do it when the opportunity arises. Really listen and share your own perspective proudly. And let us cross boundaries. Let us loudly and powerfully stand up for others. For if we only focus on ourselves, we will have abandoned the prophetic purpose of Judaism. On the Friday following the horrific New Zealand mosque attack, Cantor Sklar and I, along with other Jewish leaders, visited the Al-Madani Center in Norwalk. We stood watch on the sidewalk by the entrance as a visible symbol of friendship, unity, and protection for their community. For ensuring that our society is safe for Muslims is also ensuring that it is safe for Jews. Paul Krugman wrote, "When bigotry runs free, we are always next in line for persecution." We then joined the congregation for Friday prayers. The Imam invited us to stand with him afterward in the receiving line. And we wished Assalamu alaikum to each and every congregant as they exited. Members of the congregation, Muslims who trace their origins to the Middle East and Central Asia and Southeast Asia and Africa and elsewhere, said to us, "Thank you for being here. If I am only for myself, what am I?" And there's another part to this story, friends. Many of you know that in 2015, Temple Israel partnered with 6 local churches to sponsor a Syrian refugee family. I've spoken about this effort many times. What you may not know is that Muhammad, who came here as a chef and Arabic teacher, is now the imam leading that mosque. He uses his pulpit as we do ours to advocate for the very best that Islam has to offer: good character, personal insight, peace. Only in an America in which communities proudly and powerfully stand up for one another is Muhammad's story even possible. But we worry. We worry about the direction in which America is sliding. There is reason to despair in both political parties. After all, one might disassociate oneself from Ilhan Omar, only to find oneself affiliated at the other end of the spectrum with Steve King. Now let's be clear. There is no one Jewish way to vote. So whichever way you vote, there is courageous work to be done. To paraphrase Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, I don't care what party you belong to, as long as you're embarrassed by it. So let's speak up. On the right, let us oppose the anti-Semitic trope of disloyalty. And on the left, let us oppose the anti-Semitic trope that links Jews and money and paints us as controlling finance and the media. On the right, let us unequivocally disavow the ideology of white supremacy and the pandering to white supremacists. Let us establish a zero-tolerance policy for hate speech. And on the left, let us vehemently oppose BDS the movement to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel. I've often said that it's perfectly acceptable to criticize certain actions or policies of the Israeli government. We would say the same about America too, of course. But as the former French Prime Minister Emmanuel Valls noted, there is an incontestable link between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. It is legitimate to criticize the policies of Israel. This criticism exists in Israel itself, he said. But the radical criticism of the very existence of Israel is anti-Semitic. Behind anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Let us do all of this, all that I've spoken of, because we are proud. After all, our Judaism is not about persecution, Holocaust, and anti-Semitism. It is about joy and purpose. It is about hope and healing. It is about awe and wonder. It's about improving ourselves and improving our world. It's about using our power for our own interests and to lift others up. It's about putting our firmly held principles and long-cherished values into action. So friends, let us actively cultivate Jewish pride. I was especially proud this year of the quintuple B'nai Mitzvah ceremony that we held at the Kotel this April. I see some of you guys here. As we entered the gates of the old city, we saw hundreds of Jews all converging on the same location. Groups were accompanied by long-haired young men dressed in white, playing drums and clarinet and blowing the shofar. We took our spot by the Western Wall and unrolled a brand new Torah scroll to be used for the first time. It had been commissioned by members of our congregation. And as our 5 B'nai Mitzvah read beautifully from it, we could hear similar ceremonies underway all around us in Portuguese and Italian and Spanish and Russian and English and Hebrew, of course. It was a cacophony of Jewish vitality. It was the sound of the Jewish people fully alive and diversely vibrant, dancing and celebrating as another generation took its place in our long and unbroken chain. That proud Jewish gathering made a statement. Despite everything, we are still here. We still believe, and we are proud. Every single proud and public Jewish act is a courageous act against anti-Semitism. So what does courage, Jewish courage, look like to you? Maybe it's replacing that hamsa around your neck with a prominent Jewish star. Maybe it's ceasing the disclaimer when you speak about your identity. You know, the one that goes, I'm Jewish, but not religious. I mean, you're here today, aren't you? So maybe it looks like offering an honest response to a hurtful comment that you would have previously shied away from. Maybe it's having a brave conversation about Israel on Facebook, or countering an unfair or downright false narrative about Israel in real life. Maybe it's expressing your own challenges with Israeli policy while expressing your love and support for the country as a whole. Maybe it's crossing a boundary into a new community, carrying with you the very best of Jewish values. Maybe it's ensuring that there is no space for hate or anti-Semitism in the political party you support. Friends, in this new year, may each of us find opportunities to be courageous because we are resilient and because we are proud. In this new year, let us stand up. Let us speak up. Let us enter into brave conversations and let us cross boundaries. After all, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.
The words of this song were written in 1936 by Norwegian poet and writer Nordahl Grieg as a reaction to the Spanish Civil War. The translation to English is mine. The poem is called To the Youth, and it was set to music in 1952 by the Danish composer Otto Mortensen. It has since become the Scandinavian anthem for non-violent resistance. Notably, it was sung in commemoration of the victims of the terrorist attacks in Oslo and on the Norwegian island of Utøya in 2011. As we leave the Jewish year of 5779, we are also ending the 75th anniversary of the rescue of Danish Jews to Sweden. The Nazis who had occupied Denmark ordered their deportation on Rosh Hashanah. But a German diplomat leaked the information, and most of the Danish Jews went into hiding. Their rescuers were simple fishermen, but their recognition that their Jewish neighbors were their compatriots in need made them heroes. They ferried their fellow Danes across the Sound, very close to where my family and I live, to Sweden, to safety. This song reminds me of their courage, their resilience, and insistence on what is right.
Kringsatt av fiender, gå inn i din tid. Under en blodig storm, ved deg til strid. Kanskje du spør i angst, udekket åpen. Hva skal jeg kjempe med? Hva er mitt våpen? Foes may surround you on every hand. This is the time to fight. Now make your stand. Daunted you question, fearful and shaken. How can I fight them? Where is my weapon? Here is your armor, here is your sword. Faith in humanity, plowshare and word. For all our children's sake, stay till the battle's won. Hark freedom's plaintive ache, dare revolution. Hunger and poverty, born of our greed, help us to build a world on harvest and seed. Children we tend with love, grown on the morrow, earth, sun, and stars above, just ours to borrow. Dette løftet vårt fra båt til upon